welcome to a special show geared at dissecting the appropriations bill. Uh, we apologize for the late start. I'm your host, Angie, and today we are going to be speaking with the leader of audio. Give us a minute. There we go. So, the question on everybody's mind. By the way, folks, Mr. Shasney is joining us via phone line today because of a scheduling error. So, the question on everybody's mind, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, is the appropriations bill. What exactly does it mean for the average St. Lucian? Now, I did catch your wonderful interview last evening, and I must commend you on a great showing last evening on Newsmaker Live, and you brought up some very interesting points, and I'm hoping that you can touch on these points a little bit, especially what you said about the CIP and also about the proposed cruise port for Viewport. But let's start with the appropriations bill and what it means for the average St. Lucian, because this is the biggest budget to date in St. Lucia. And I know that you have concerns about the debt to GDP. So could you just expound on that for us, please?
So the budget's really broken up into two parts. One is the estimates, and the other one's the appropriations bill. So the estimates is basically a focus on the recurrent expenditure of government. So how much money is going into salaries, how much money is being spent and is being requested of Parliament for the executive, the cabinet, to spend this year. Mm-hmm. The appropriations bill is a bit broader than that. So the appropriations bill kind of gives a more of a longer term perspective of where we're going, and it builds on trends, whereas the estimates are the now. So what is going to be spent on this year in comparison to what was being spent on last year.
Right.
So the appropriations bill is very important for individuals in determining what kind of confidence you have the economy is going to grow, to deal with specific things and improving your own quality of life. What is going to be happening with healthcare? What's going to be happening with national security? What's going to be happening with infrastructure, particularly in the communities? What social support programs is the government going to be embarking upon? What's government's policy on the gas prices and subsidies of the different sectors? And very importantly, what are the capital projects that the government is going to be getting? Now, generally speaking, capital projects give us a level of insight into the direction that the government's going and how they're going to be going about increasing the GDP, how to make sure that there's growth in the GDP. So that's in essence, in a nutshell, what the appropriations bill is really about. Now, in terms of critiquing the appropriations bill, what we look for is for consistencies. And, this government has a habit of saying one thing but doing something entirely different. And this is where we see if there's consistency. If the government is saying, for instance, that it's going to manage its debt, and we see the debt to GDP increasing substantially, then there's an inconsistency.
Right.
If the government says that they're going to be doing capital projects that's going to be generating growth, and we're not seeing that growth taking place, where are we going? So, let's take an easy one that everybody understands is bananas.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So the government now is trying to convince solutions that their intention is to bring back bananas. But when you look at the numbers, banana revenue is down to $6 million. $3 million on sales outside of St. Lucia. And of that $3 million, Antigua is $2 million. The UK market was $20,000. And then domestically,
I think you made a mistake with the numbers there. You said the UK market was 20,000. I think that was more in the. There were a lot more zeros, I believe, attached to that.
No, it used to be, but this last year, the social and economic review showed that sales to the UK market was $20,000.
Wow.
Now, when you think of the number of people who have abandoned their banana farms, the problems with diseases,
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it would be very difficult for us, in my humble opinion, to get back in any kind of meaningful way into the UK market. Is there enough demand for our bananas regionally? And is there enough demand domestically for that to happen? And this is why I brought up the cocoa, because in my mind, cocoa is really the new crop. And I'll reiterate what I said. The government said very little to nothing on cocoa.
Right.
The minister objected, saying, "Oh well, she said that Mars, the company that produces chocolate,
Mm-hmm.
bought Hotel Chocolat." Well, that to me is not tantamount to a policy on cocoa.
Right.
So it was also interesting to note in the budget that the fastest growing part of our culture is crops, fresh crops.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And the fresh crops is, I believe, as a result of the work that we were doing when we were in government, that we were focusing. I don't know if you remember, on the 7 crops.
Right, I remember that.
So we had done an analysis as to what are the agricultural products we thought that we could produce 100% in St. Lucia. And we identified 7 crops, and we said we'd be focusing on that. So it was interesting to see that the value of crop sales this year was around $60 million, and had been increasing quite substantially over the years. So, look, I think that that's a green shoot that's worth exploring. But these are the kinds of things that you would expect to hear in the budget. I mean, I think, last night I touched on one of them that was really clearly missing.
Mm-hmm.
You would have expected that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, when he spoke,
Mm-hmm.
that he would have dealt extensively with what happened with the UK market and our visas.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have thought that he would have found a way to give us some comfort as to what's happening with Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and the Schengen visa, and the perceptions, and maybe it's the reality of a lot of people, that it's becoming much more difficult to get a US visa, to get a Canadian visa. We're only now entering the process of what it's going to take to get a UK visa.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that the people are very scared and are very concerned, because something that we've taken for granted for a very long time.
Yeah.
Now we can't. The ability to just get on a plane and go to England, we've been deprived of that. And it was amazing to me that the minister didn't even speak once, didn't even hint to it. So these are where we now start identifying some of the inconsistencies. What are people looking for? What are we hoping that's going to generate growth in our economy? How is the government going to handle inflation? Mm-hmm. And so this is why I would say to you, I certainly have learned over time how to read the semantics of the Labour Party. So the Labour Party would have told all of us repeatedly that they're not going to add any new taxes, correct?
Right. Correct. They
But
keep
we are in
saying
an
that.
environment now where the government needs to reduce taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So what I have now learned is when they say they're not going to increase any taxes, what they're really saying to the public of St. Lucia is we're not going to be reducing any taxes.
Right.
Okay? So you're on your own. I mean, last night the price of oil jumped to $126. It's now gone down to $116, but nonetheless, it's obviously substantially higher than what it's been in the past. The government has promised to keep the prices unchanged for the 3 weeks, but it's giving no commitment as to what's going to happen afterwards. So I think the government is setting up themselves and the public of St. Lucia, by extension, that they will increase the price of gas, notwithstanding how much money they have made over the last couple of years by not lowering the price.
Now, just to put things in perspective, political leader, what can you remember what the price of gas was like during the COVID-19 pandemic? Because at that time, there was a whole lot of discussion about the price of gas being too high. There were strikes from the bus drivers. There was the gas station owners association, I believe, always in the news when you had the gas prices capped at $13.95, I believe.
Correct.
What was
and the irony in all of that is that the gas dealers and wholesalers make a fixed profit,
right?
But it's based on consumption.
Okay.
So yes, the price of gas during the COVID period fluctuated extensively. But what we said is, notwithstanding how high the price goes, the government capped the price at $14.95.
It was $13.95.
Sorry, $13.95.
Right.
And the reason why we did that, elders, is because we understood the impact that gas prices had on taxi fares, bus fares, and the cost of doing business.
Right.
And so we felt it was more important that the government absorb whatever increases were coming in, rather than to allow the public and the commercial sector to absorb it. This government obviously thinks very, very differently as to how that operates. In fact, the Prime Minister said it when the Prime Minister said that despite the pressure by the opposition to lower the gas prices, he deliberately kept the prices higher and kept the money for government because he was concerned as to how the people were going to spend the money. It's a damning statement.
It is, and quite a very, very strange statement, in my opinion, coming from the leader of a country, especially with the way the cost of living has spiked in St. Lucia over the past couple of years. And now we're seeing this issue with the fuel surcharge, with Lucelec warning consumers that they're going to see a significant hike in their bills because of the fuel surcharge. Now, a lot of people, myself included, want to know if there is anything, if it's even appropriate to ask government to maybe subsidize that fuel surcharge to give the people of St. Lucia a reprieve. Is that something that government can do?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of things that government can do. Government can decide that the incremental surcharge, that they can pay that to Lucelec. Okay, because Lucelec is entitled to earn that money. Okay, and that's part of their contract.
Right.
But maybe we can go back in time a little bit.
Okay.
There was a very controversial thing, or they made it out to be controversial, when we organized for the NIC to sell some of its Lucelec shares and to allow the city council to buy those shares. It was either that way or vice versa.
Right.
And the reason why we did that is because once a shareholder gets to a certain threshold, they then guaranteed a seat at the board.
Okay.
So what we did allowed us to get one additional seat at the board. And whether it's whether it's NIC, or whether it is the city council, and it's still government controlled.
Right.
And we could help influence those votes. So that's why it was done. And the reason for that is because the contract with Lucelec needs to be renegotiated.
Okay.
We're not going to benefit from green energy unless there is an ability for people to generate green energy and to sell it into the grid, meaning to sell it to Lucelec.
Right.
And that is the impediment. And so not doing that, and that's where I keep on saying that this government seems to forget that they were in government for the last 5 years. And they're acting like it's their first time in government.
Well, they keep referring to the former administration, and I wonder if they've forgotten that they've been in government for 2 terms. So
correct. So the question is, why didn't they do that before? Don't come and tell us about all these wonderful things now, and you didn't do it before. So, if we were to be structured about the critique of the budget, I would say to you that it falls into 3 parts. One is debt. 2 is expenditure. And the third one really is governance.
Before you continue, political leader, I have a question, and I know it's something that you're very concerned about because you spoke about it. The debt to GDP. Now, you made a statement, you said that the growth in the economy is mostly due to inflation, and you did give an example about the taxes, even that the way the taxes are calculated as a percentage of the price of the item, when even if the taxes are not increased, the percentage is not increased, when the price of the item increases, the tax automatically increases, and that can add more revenue to the government.
Yeah, so I gave the example of soap.
Right.
Of a bar of soap.
Right. So
if a bar of soap costs $1, and the tax is 10%.
Right.
So that means that the government would collect 10 cents. And if the bar of soap goes to $1.50 and the tax remains at 10%, it means now that the government is going to collect 15 cents.
Right. Now, my concern...
But wait a second, the price change does not, in my mind, constitute real growth.
Right.
Because you're still only getting 1 bar of soap.
That's true. True.
So it means that the government could have lowered the 10% rate to a level where they still would have only collected 10 cents.
10 cents. Now, the question on everybody's mind, political leader, is how do we hear all of this borrowing? And you made a point of saying that the $600,000, I'm not sure if I'm saying the figure correctly, that was borrowed.
650 million.
Right, $650 million that was borrowed is part of the last budget and not part of this new budget. And then you made a point of saying that they're planning on more borrowing. The question on every St. Lucian's mind, because the Prime Minister was asked what is his fiscal policy, and he said taxation. How do we repay these taxes if there is no significant manufacturing or agricultural industry or even technological industry? I know artificial intelligence and coding and stuff was an industry that you wanted to break into through Ojo Labs and these other investments. But if we don't have these things, like for example, back in the 80s and the 90s, we had the Coconut Growers Association and that factory in Soufre. We had the Beausejour dairy factory. We had the banana industry, even if it was already on a decline. But there was clearly some form of economic activity that would allow the country to service the debts. In this present
So
climate, where are we?
you're a little bit all over the place on this one, but let me try to answer your question or your
Yeah.
concerns. The debt to GDP is simply a ratio,
Right.
which would tell you the influence of debt on your economy. So if the debt is close to 100% debt to GDP, it means that your debt is as large as your GDP.
Right.
And that would tell you, boy, that means in servicing the debt, it's going to be very difficult if it's the size of your GDP.
Right.
Okay? So that's why they say ideally, you need to borrow money to be able to grow. But if you're borrowing money to grow and what you're investing your money into is not causing you to grow, then it's going to be a big, big, big problem. So let's bring it down to some simpler terms.
Right.
If you are in a position right now where the job that you have is not sufficient to pay for all of your expenses. So if you have a mortgage, you have a car loan, you have, to eat, you have your utility bills, etc. And if in fact the amount of money you're earning does not cover all of those things, and you do a bounce and draw, right? And so this month I don't pay my electricity bill, and this month I pay my Wasco bill, or you move your money around,
Right.
okay? You have a couple of options. You can either say, okay, I need to get another job, or I need to get a second job to generate some revenue, or I need to change my lifestyles. Maybe I need to sell the car.
Right.
Maybe I need to find a better way to consume less of my electricity, right? But something has to give. Now, if I decide to go and borrow money to get another car to become a taxi, and I forgot to get a TX plate, and therefore I don't have the ability of being a taxi, but I've already paid for the car. That's a bad investment. So that means now you've made a capital investment into something, and it's not generating the additional revenue. In fact, what it's doing, it's actually costing you more money. So if we take, for instance, the halls of justice, the halls of justice is going to cost Solutions $300 million just to build the building.
Wow.
That does not include how much it's going to cost to operate.
Wow.
Okay? Do you believe that that is going to significantly contribute in any way to growing the economy?
No.
So if you're going to use money for that, you want to try to get as concessional of a loan as possible. Because it's not going to have a high return. Is it important? Yes, because if you can temper crime over a period of time, it will have positive benefits on the living standards of the country, and it could potentially significantly, not significant, but reduce the cost of living in St. Lucia. Okay? So
I'm with you so far.
So where is the revenue going to come from to cover the cost? So the Prime Minister said, because I pointed out that we're going to repay for the halls of justice in the form of rent. And the rent is going to be $30 million a year. Just for that building.
Wow.
So what he said was, well, that's not really rent because we're going to own the building in 12 years' time. No? The same thing applied to the Daher Mall, which the government criticized.
Right.
That's the exact same process. The difference is the rent at the Diagram Mall is $4. The rent for the halls of justice is $16.
Yeah.
Okay? So in this instance, why didn't they allow the NIC to own the building? And government would have signed a 30-year lease. So it means the amount of money that you're going to pay on a monthly basis would have been spread over 30 years rather than 12 years.
Right.
And there would have been no issue as to adding debt to the country because it would have been an asset owned by the NIC.
Mm-hmm.
You could have, if you were willing to justify paying a 10% interest rate to NH for the development, why not pay 5% to NIC over the period of time? So NIC would have made some additional money.
Mm-hmm.
And in making that money, that would have helped pay the pensions.
Now, speaking of NIC, what is your take on this new $1,000 baby grant? That's my name for it. I know that's not the official name, but that's how I see it. The Prime Minister is trying to say that the policy is misconstrued. He's not trying to encourage people to give birth. What he is trying to do is start a conversation. What is your take on this?
This is exactly the kind of policy that a $5 to block a hole mentality would come up with.
Yeah.
And I can just say to you, it's a political distraction from all of the other burning issues that ought to be addressed.
Right.
So if you look at it, a person would get $1,000, but just even the 9 months leading up to your birth, what the cost is.
Hmm.
And then when you think of the lifetime of a child up until they're 18 years of age, how much is that going to cost you? So what does $1,000 really do? And have you calculated how much money that's going to cost the government on an annual basis?
Exactly.
Have you calculated?
At this point, we, for example, I heard that the birth rate for 2025 was 1,300, a little over 1,300 kids. So
how much does that come to?
that's a lot of money.
1.1.
That is
No,
a
it's
lot
not.
of money.
$1.3 million.
$1.3 million is a lot of money. I don't have it.
The budget's $2 billion. No, the $1.3 million is what it's costing the government. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
every year. If you have 1,300 persons being born,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to give $1,000 per person, it means that the government is going to have to pay out $1.3 million.
Right.
So let me give you a comparable example.
Mm-hmm.
CXCs, right?
Mm-hmm.
The government's made a very big issue about CXCs. $500. That's what it's costing government per child. How many children per year are going to be sitting in these CXCs? 2,000.
Right.
So $500 times 2,000 people is $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
The government's budget is $2.something billion.
Right.
Okay? Now, United Workers' Party was offering the e-books and was going to pay the license fee for the books. So it means that we would have paid for an e-book, we would have paid the license fee not for 1,000 kids graduating in the final year, but for the 9,000 kids who are in secondary school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And how much do people pay on average every year for books? $1,000,
Yep.
$800 every year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, Form 4, Form 5.
Mm-hmm.
So it was going to cost my government closer to $9 million per year. The yet a lot of people were fooled into believing that the CXCs is this great contribution that the government is making. That's why I say to you, it just blocks a hole.
Right.
But the government is not giving you any policies that are going to significantly move the needle. So giving your kids ebooks is getting them accustomed to using the technology of the world today.
Mm-hmm.
And made it substantially cheaper for parents who are every year having to find $1,000 to buy school books for their children.
Well, some people would say that this policy would cost the government less, would as opposed to the ebooks policy, which, like you say, would have been a significantly higher cost on the back of the government. How do you justify the price difference?
But it's easy because you're helping people.
Right.
And you're focusing on education. All right, so when you look at the ebooks, one, it was helping reduce the administrative time that teachers were having to spend, so they could focus more time on teaching. Two, we were putting a video together of all the best teachers in each of the different forms for each of the different subjects. So it means regardless of where your child went to school, they still had access to what we consider to be the best teachers in the island, instead of having everybody want to go to St. Mary's or everybody wanted to go to St. Joseph's.
Right.
Okay? Plus, you're using a technology that is going to help you in being a more productive person in life. So when the government then dropped that program and gave people computers with no software in it, you've heard nothing. And then turn around and say, we're going to pay your CXCs for you. Right? That's just a gimmick.
Yeah.
That, in my mind, those are not the policies that are going to really help you improve in life. Now, I say that because these are all investments that the government is making. And the question is it going to help the economy grow? And in the economy growing, the government could earn more money without increasing the rate of taxes. And that is a fundamental difference between the Labour Party and United Workers' Party. United Workers' Party believes wholeheartedly that money is better in people's hands. That's why when we lowered the VAT rate, we subsidized rice flour and sugar. We kept the prices of gasoline low, was to make sure, and we lowered general taxes, was to make sure there was more money in people's pockets. So one of the biggest red flags that has happened in this budget this year was that consumption, the sales at retail and wholesale, was down 3%. That's alarming. And then when you now understand that the government injected $110 million into the economy, into SSDF, put another $65 million into the coffers, they put $25 million into healthcare, and $13 million or $12 million into WASCO. So, and added $340 million of new debt. So that's a massive injection of money that they put into the economy, and yet the economy contracted. So what that says to everybody that understands those numbers is that the economy was in a lot worse position than we all thought it was.
Yeah.
Yet leading up to the election, the government said everything was great, best ever, record levels.
Yes.
But we're now finding out in this budget that that was a lie. Tourism was down, manufacturing was down, consumption was down. Okay, homicides were up. A lot of things are going in the wrong direction, and the most frightening one is, look, I think it's understandable that when COVID came, that the economy contracted because the world was shut down. There was nothing that the government could do for the first 3 months.
Right.
But when we got past that, we reopened our economy. We were heavily criticized for doing that. The economy grew after contracting by 24%. It grew by 12% the following year and 18% the following year as well. So by 2023, the debt to GDP was back to 70%. So since now 2023, the debt to GDP has increased to 85%. Now, after you've borrowed over $1 billion and now you came to get another $650 million, can you tell me where is that? Where do we see that money? How's that improved anybody's lifestyles?
I think a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people cannot understand clearly what the debt to GDP and all of these things mean, and there is a bit of confusion because people don't really understand how it affects me as a person as opposed to how it affects the country. So it's always great to get a little bit more insight into these very technical terms that sometimes can cause a bit of confusion. Now, I heard you last evening talk about this injection that you just mentioned, and you called it a stimulus package, but you also mentioned that you wrote a letter to the Director of Finance seeking clarification on how this was rolled out. Can you give some more insight on that?
So look, while we were running the elections, we kept being confronted by voters as to how much money they were getting.
Right.
There were food vouchers, there was billing materials, there were grants, there were short-term contracts, all kinds of stuff that was taking place. And it was not until after the election that we found out where the money came from. So I have to be honest with you, I would have presumed a lot of the money was coming from monies that the Labour Party was raising by their party for elections. I would have never thought that the government would have taken $110 million from the citizenship program and put it into a statutory entity, SSDF, and to use it as a political stimulus. So the purpose of it is to say, okay, at no point, and you've been in the media for the last couple of years, did the government make any pronouncements that they were going to be spending $110 million to prop up social development and infrastructure in the communities. Do you remember any such program?
Nope, not at all. What I do recall is comments being made in the House of Parliament to the tune of, when you're going to see all the bridges and the culverts and the thing that will come from the CIP, you're going to be jealous. These were the comments we were hearing, but there was nothing concrete, nothing official to say this is the policy.
I want to be very clear. The CIP money belongs to everyone. And if you didn't have enough money to give everybody a piece of it, then there has to be some kind of criteria that you would have to adopt in order to discriminate.
Right.
Okay? So was it only for poor people? Was it for single mothers? Who was it for? Who got to apply? How did you get access to the money? And these are the questions that we're asking the Director of Finance, because the Director of Finance wears two hats. He is the chairman of the Economic Fund, where the CIP money goes. And so any use of that money, a request has to go to the board.
Right.
Okay? And I would imagine that if a request came from the government to do this kind of stimulus program, that there would have to be clear criteria and guidelines as to how the money was going to be spent.
Have you...
Very, very important.
Yeah. Well, the government, the prime minister, in his 2025-2026 budget speech, did promise accountability, transparency, truth, and integrity. So I think these questions are very pertinent and they do deserve an answer. But we do have questions from persons tuning in, and one person is asking you to comment on the idea of open trading in to SLASPA. What do you think about that?
Sorry, I don't understand that question. Open trading to.
Yeah, that okay. Well, the person wasn't clear. That was the question. Comment on open trading to SLASPA, but uh, anyway, maybe the listener can provide further clarity on what exactly they want to ask. There was also you also spoke during your budget speech about the tourism industry, and you were very clear talking about the contraction in that industry. You spoke about the current boycott of the Canadian market into the United States. You spoke about the British market and all of these areas where you believe that we are falling short.
Yeah. So let's look at the Canadian. The Canadian market was down 9%.
Mm-hmm.
And in absolute terms, we get around, I think 35,000 Canadians a year. It's an insignificant number of people. Right? You're talking about 3,000 Canadians a month.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Millions of Canadians go to Cuba. Millions of Canadians go to the US. Millions. Both those markets, in the case of the United States, Canadians are boycotting it. And in the case of Cuba, because of the economic boycotts that are taking place in Cuba, Canadians have stopped going there.
Mm-hmm.
How is it we've not been able to increase our numbers?
Well, the minister says that we have a lack of room stock. He said that.
But I've disproved that.
Right.
Because 2024 was our best year.
Mm-hmm.
According to him. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And St. James Hotel was closed. St. James Hotel reopened in 2025.
Right.
You've now also saw after the elections a project that we were working on. Sandals added more rooms at Halcyon.
Mm-hmm.
Sandals also added more rooms at La Toc. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So the rooms that we've lost are the Rex properties, and the occupancy of the Rex properties were very low.
I believe also that Windjammer Landings has increased their room stock as well.
I think they did, but I'm not sure exactly when they did.
Yeah.
But let's say that's nonsense. Mm-hmm. That's just an excuse, and then it's easily refuted because the occupancy rate went down.
Right.
If you have less rooms, okay, and there's only a slight decrease in numbers, then the occupancy has to be higher.
True.
Okay, so let's dismiss that. Mm-hmm. They just didn't do their homework. But yet, Barbados is seeing two new interventions in the Canadian market. One, Air Canada has now put on a service from Halifax to Barbados. And then Porter Airlines, which is a third airline in Canada, is going to be starting service from Toronto to Barbados. Right. Okay? We've got nothing. Then you have the UK market that was down 19%. And he's saying, because we don't have family resorts.
Yes.
Well, then change your marketing to what we do have.
Right.
Okay? And an opportunity was given to you. When the outbreak in the Middle East, all the airlines, Emirates, what's the other one? Qatar Airlines, right. All these airlines have a massive hub in the Middle East, and a lot of British passengers, visitors, going to the Seychelles and to the Maldives would have gone through the Middle East. So all of a sudden they couldn't go. So where did all those wealthy people go? Clearly they didn't come to St. Lucia.
Definitely not. But
okay, so this is where whenever there's global crises or crisis, there's opportunity. But you need to understand the business to figure out how to take advantage of those opportunities. And this government is just about talk.
now you're speaking about air travel, but cruise tourism has taken a dive in recent years. Recently, the CTO put out a report stating that out of 35 million tourists that visited the Caribbean, only a little over 1 million visited St. Lucia. So obviously, we have a problem in that area as well. To what do you attribute that?
Because from the time we signed the GPH deal, we increased the head tax from $6 to $12. So we've become the most expensive port. And how do you prove that? The numbers to Dominica went up. The numbers to St. Vincent has gone up. The numbers to Martinique and Guadeloupe have gone up. Okay? And the numbers to St. Kitts has gone up. So the ships have diverted their schedules. They've sent smaller and older ships to St. Lucia. And the newer, bigger boats have gone to other destinations, not St. Lucia. Not complicated to figure out. And GPH doesn't care because GPH is getting a higher rate, and even if the numbers were to reduce to what they did, they're still making more money.
Right.
But the taxi drivers, the vendors, and all the persons that depend on the tours, that depend on the volume of business, are the ones who are paying the price. Because there's less people coming, and in fact, on those boats, less people are getting off the boats.
Still with cruise tourism, I was quite surprised, and I know you were as well because you made that comment, that the government is now proposing to revisit home porting in a Vieux Fort. Now, I have two questions about that one. First off, I know that there is some sort of litigation coming out of Desert Star Holdings over the loss of their license to operate in St. Lucia and loss of income due to the fact that the project was stalled or in the south. My first question about this initiative is, are we going to see another cabot? Do you think the government will invite Desert Star Holdings to resume the project? And are we going to see another fresh start situation happening in the South? Do you think that is the way they would go?
Well, look, first of all, it is quite a dramatic change of policy, and one that's extremely welcome.
Yeah,
because it's the right thing to do. But we've lost 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Vieux Fort, in my humble opinion, will be the best cruise ship port in the entire Eastern Caribbean. And Barbados and Antigua all know that. You know, that's why there was not much of a love affair for Alan Chastney at that level.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's going to contribute not only to the economic prosperity of the people in the South, it's going to differentiate us substantially from all of the other cruise ship ports, and then it will also tie in to our airport in helping bring more air traffic into the airport and earn more fees for the government. Mm-hmm. So it's a win-win-win-win situation all around. Whereas expanding the cruise ship facilities, as they were talking about in Castries, made absolutely no sense.
Right.
So that's the first thing. In terms of their relationship with DSH, we accomplished at least one very important step. in the budgetary debate, because I highlighted the fact that it was the Labour Party who brought DSH and Tio King to St. Lucia.
Right.
A lot of people didn't know that. A lot of people didn't know that.
I did not know that myself.
And I showed the letter that Philip Pierre wrote when he was the acting prime minister, acknowledging what DSH was going to do. The horse racing track, the hotel, the university, the commercial centers, all the same thing. And he also made reference to the framework agreement. The framework agreement was drafted while Labour Party was in government. Now, the Prime Minister is on record of saying that he never signed any document. You've heard that tape that he said?
Yes.
When it came to the DSH?
Yes.
Well, Ernest Hilaire put that to rest. Because when I produced the letter, he said, well, the letter is only a letter of comfort. I said, well, he signed it. So he did sign a document as it pertains to DSH. It's like with Cabot.
Yeah.
They demonized Cabot. But before Cabot was Cabot, it was Raffles.
Right.
And the party that was in government when Raffles came to St. Lucia was the Labour Party.
True.
So what's the difference between Raffles and Cabot? In fact, the reason why Cabot bought the property was because of Raffles. So you see, the Labour Party is prepared to take positions of political convenience.
Mm-hmm.
I will not do that. When I came in and the DSH project was there, I didn't play politics and say, hell no, we're not going to do that. If it made sense, we would do it.
Right.
Okay? When we came in, the decisions and the negotiations for the desilting of the dam were well advanced. It was the Labour Party who imposed the desilting fee. So how you impose the desilting fee? You participated in it, and now you want to condemn the project. And we implemented the project literally as was designed by you. So again, it's a position of political convenience.
Back to the DSH.
All these convenient. Sorry, go ahead.
Back to the DSH project. The question on everybody's mind: do you believe that they will do the same thing they did with? Are we going to? Do you believe we're going to see an instance of the government eating their vomit and inviting Tio Akin to resume the project, or do you think that they're going to bring in somebody new and go in a different direction from what Tio Akin designed?
So I have not been in discussions at all with Mr. Akin.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say to you, any investor that has been treated the way that he is,
mm-hmm.
I would imagine that he would have a difficult time in convincing that his board of directors
mm-hmm.
that they should continue the project.
Right.
But I don't know what the thinking of DSH would be. But certainly, they're either going to have to compensate him
mm-hmm.
because they're the ones who pull the business license, but I'm not the judge. I'm not going to be the one arbitrating the case. But, just on the basis of it, it looks like the government erred. But if they don't want to compensate him, then they're going to have to convince him of what they're going to do in order to encourage him to make the investment.
Now, I want you to put something to rest. Once again, in the budget debate, the leader of government business accused you of colluding with Tio Akin, but now you're saying you have not had any discussion with him. I know this is a foolish question, but I still believe that it warrants clarification. Have you been in any way colluding with Tio Akin to bring the government to task, to take the government to task over this loss of business license?
No. In fact, I believe at that same session, I went above and beyond to say, if the government wanted me to be involved in the discussions, I would be happy to do so. And that the position that I would take would always be the one that's in the best interest of the country.
Right.
So I'm not here. I don't celebrate the fact that the project hasn't gone through. It's very sad.
Yeah.
But this is not the first time that we've seen this kind of behavior from the Labour Party. Remember, they are the ones who at one point said they were going to write investors not to come to St. Lucia.
Right.
They're the ones who said that Sandals did not pay taxes when that's not true. That's not true. And they demonize Sandals. And then all of a sudden you get into government, you find out that Sandals is going to be doing an expansion, and now they're your best friends.
Well, we've seen that. That seems to be an ongoing theme with this government. We saw this with Fresh Start. They demonized Fresh Start, then they went back, and the minister is famous for saying he ate his vomit. We saw it with Cabot. Cabot was demonized, and then Cabot became the best thing, and so on and so forth. So this seems to be a recurring theme with this government. But I know that there are other very important issues that you want to touch on, but we do have another question from the audience. Somebody's asking about the special prosecutor, whether he is still employed, and if it is of public knowledge how much he's being paid, because there was a lot of hype about the special prosecutor being brought in to stamp out corruption in the government, especially in your administration. But it's very anticlimactic because the special prosecutor was appointed, but then we've seen absolutely nothing coming out of this office. What say you?
Well, we're all confused because I remember Peter Chico had written to him.
Yes.
And he said that he cannot go back in time. His office is only to deal with things moving forward. But we also know legally the special prosecutor cannot act autonomously, cannot act by himself.
Right.
Okay? The DPP is still the ultimate decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
So normally a special prosecutor comes on to complement the DPP's office. So if you've identified an investigation and you want to have dedicated resources to it, you bring in a special prosecutor to work with the DPP's office.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know you bring a special prosecutor to go in on a witch hunt and then also at the same time say he's not going to go back in time.
Well.
So I think the results of the special prosecutor over the last couple of years speaks volumes. This is again just another distraction, and it doesn't mean that he can't attempt to prosecute, but I think that he will have a very difficult time in being successful in that regard. And then when you think of the number of things that need to be examined at this point, it's frightening. I mean, we know about the checks that were involved by local government on the graveyard sites in the south, and fictitious contractors and all kinds of stuff. There's been no investigation. We see a contract has been given for the Olympic pool that started off at 12 million, it went to 20 million, now it's at 30 million, and the project's not even close to being finished. In fact, we lost our bid for the Carifta Games to take place in St. Lucia for the swimming, because the pool is not going to be ready.
Wow.
Where are the specifics on that? And now I would say to you very clearly, if $110 million was put into SSDF, and who is the CEO of SSDF? A guy called John Victory.
John Victory, yes. If I recall correctly, wasn't he a candidate at one point?
Yes, he was. Yes. And so and I'm not making any allegations against the gentleman, but if you're going to do that, and you're going to put a politician to head it up, then there's even a greater need for transparency.
Right.
The fact that no documentation exists as to what this program was, how you were supposed to apply. So if you take the youth economy as an example, right? Look at the publicity that went about the youth economy, the bragging that went about the youth economy. Where was the bragging about $110 million stimulus? Where is it?
Right. Because there's another thing, Mr. Shasney, that just seems off to me. I don't know if maybe I don't understand how politics works or how government works, but I'm seeing this huge ad campaign. I am the I in CIP and all of that. And I'm saying to myself, since when does the government advertise? And where is the money coming from to fund this initiative? And
the money is coming from CIP. And clearly it marked the beginning of this program. Because you see, there are clearly people who would have benefited from this program. Is that not true?
Yeah.
And obviously the I didn't mean everybody. The I only meant certain people. Right. And that's the problem. If you're going to use state resources, then it has to be fair, transparent, and equally available to everyone. Not just because somebody's going to vote for you. If in fact that's what took place.
So now, is that going to be
what is even more frightening, Eldris, is the revelations that we discovered in finally when the government released the audited accounts of CIP. We found out that 95% of the revenue of the earnings of CIP came from the due diligence fees and the administrative fees, and not from passport sales. There's only $11 million that were attributed to passport sales. But $402 million came from $200 million from the administrative fee, from the due diligence fees, and $180 million from the administrative fees. And we also now know that in the administrative fees, while we may have collected the money, the contract with Galaxy requires us to pay that money back to Galaxy in the form of a commission.
Wow. Now, political leader, we've just been joined by Mr. Titus Previll, Senator Titus Previll. Is he a senator, or was this just temporary? But let me just let him introduce himself, and you can continue. Good morning, Mr. Previll.
Good morning, Eldris. Good morning, political leader.
Good evening. Good morning, sir.
Yes. Sorry about being a little late. We were just winding up a discussion with the Chamber of Commerce, where they had a panel discussion looking at the budget. So just coming from there and coming straight across. So I'm just go ahead, sir. I was just listening in.
Well, I mean, I think that the timing for Mr. Previll to be here is very appropriate because, as I said to you, Eldris, there are three critical components to this budget. One is the debt, and as I said to you, by 2023, the debt to GDP in St. Lucia had been reduced to 70%.
Right.
And that was on the heels of the policies the United Workers' Party put in place during COVID. We saw what we call a V-shaped recovery, a very fast recovery. So in 2021, as an example, there were only two countries in CARICOM that grew by double digits, and that was St. Lucia and Guyana. And Guyana was because they had just recently discovered oil. Okay. The following year, again, only two countries in CARICOM grew by double digits. Again, St. Lucia and Guyana. And that fast-paced recovery, which is 100% attributable to the decisions that we made during COVID to reopen and to coexist with COVID, meant that the debt to GDP, which was before COVID at 60%, went up to 92% in 2020, down to 82% in 2021, and then down to 70% in 2022. But since then, the last 3 years, the debt to GDP has risen to 77%. And now when you take into consideration the $650 million that they cleverly borrowed before the end of the parliamentary session. So it means that it was borrowed so late that it would not have been included in the numbers for the appropriations bill, but will come into play the following year. Now, that means that the debt to GDP would have risen by 15% in 3 years. And in terms of absolute terms, that we would have added $1 billion in 3 years, and that does not include the $650 million. So I want to say to you that that's one critical issue that we all need to understand and understand the implications that's going to have moving forward. The second
political leader, before you hold on, before you, we need to take a quick commercial break. Hold that thought, and we're going to be right back so you can expound on that point.
You already know the power of Licks products on your clothes and household. You licked your whites and colored clothes, leaving them fresh and scented. You licked your dishes and left your hands protected with vitamin E. You licked your floors, even licked your toilet. Now we expand and bring you 3 new scents in our fabric softener: Balmy Sunshine, Summer Sunshine, and Thousand Flowers. And licks those stains off of colored clothes with Licks Scent Bleach. Licks went even further with Body Care Body Soap Bars in deodorant and antibacterial. So licks tiredness and bacteria out and refresh your tired body. Your product's giving you licks? Then choose Licks from Today Distribution Week. Available at all leading supermarkets.
Seabreeze Adventures would like to announce its official water taxi service for St. Lucia Jazz 2026. Pickup can be arranged from either Castries or Rodney Bay to the Pigeon Island National Landmark on show days. Transportation from Rodney Bay costs $10 US or $25 EC one way or $20 US or $50 EC return trip, and can be accessed at Lavi, Hamley Suites, or at the Rodney Bay Marina. Transportation from Castries costs $20 US or $50 EC one way or $40 US or $100 EC a round trip. Pickup points in the city are at La Place Carenage or at Point Serafin. Customers wishing to take advantage of this service can book in advance by contacting Captain Warren at telephone number 1758-713-3196. Pickup starts at 10 a.m. until shows end. Seabreeze Adventures, not just a tour, but an adventure.
All right. So, good afternoon to you. Well, good morning to you if you're joining this special edition of Hardtalk here on Fire 107.7 FM. And if you're joining us, whether in the diaspora or on island, we have here 2 members of the Opposition United Workers' Party, the political leader of the party, Mr. Alan Shasney, who is the lone member of Parliament on the opposition side. And we also have a gentleman who made his debut in the Senate, Mr. Titus Preville. Good morning to you, Mr. Preville.
Good morning, Idris.
And good morning to you, political leader. You still with us?
I am.
Okay. So you were talking about the debt to GDP recently, and you were talking about the $650 million that was just borrowed. Could you go ahead with that point?
So as I said, the budget can be broken out into 3 parts.
Right.
One is an analysis of the debt and the current trend that we're seeing and the fast pace in which debt to GDP is increasing. And this year was probably the worst year in that the debt grew by 6.5% and GDP contracted by 0.5%. That is a catastrophe. That means that the money that you spent and you borrowed has not generated any level of economic expansion. And again, that's why when you hear that $110 million was injected into the economy through a stimulus, that you added $340 million of new debt this year into the economy, and that over another $105 million came from CIP and was injected into the economy, it's very concerning.
Right.
The second issue, and I'm only going to really set this up because I think that Titus will do a better job in going into some of those details.
Mm-hmm.
The second issue is really the rising cost of expenditure. So we've seen since COVID that expenditure growth is rising faster than revenue. And there was a short period of time of 2 years where the revenue was keeping pace. But as I said to you, the revenue that we were earning was a windfall. It was by artificially keeping the price of gas higher at the pump than what we were costing, the fuel was costing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was keeping the tax rate higher, notwithstanding that there was inflation. Smart countries would have amended their tax act and would have charged the VAT and now the health and security levy on the FOB price, and Titus can explain that, rather than on the CIF price.
Right.
But government did not do that. Government gouged the people and took the windfall entirely for themselves. So the question is that a safe bet that kind of revenue that government has been earning is going to continue? And then the third thing that the government did on revenue side was to introduce the levy, which has been generating now almost $44 million of new revenue for the state. But that revenue has come now at the expense of the consumers, and we're seeing the first big break, meaning that retail sales and hotel sales were declined by 3% this year. So that's a very worrisome side. The third issue that we have to be concerned about in this budget was governance.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that $110 million was spent and we didn't know about it, we don't know what the criteria is, that we're earning monies from CIP, and it's questionable as to how much we're supposed to have earned. I mean, as I said to you, CIP has earned a record level of revenues, but 95% of the revenue they have generated has come from a due diligence fee, which is $8,000 US.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Titus, I don't know if you have a calculator there. We can make a very, very quick calculation. We generated $402 million of revenue in 2025 from CIP. And I think in 2024, we generated something like $250 million. So you're talking about $650 million. And in extracting the information, because the government has not been transparent with the information, it would appear that we have issued something in the vicinity of 17 to 20,000 passports. So if you take 20,000 divided into $650 million, I don't know how much that comes to, Titus.
How much are you looking at? How much? 650 million. How much per passport?
No, we earned 650 million, and there was 20,000 passports.
Okay,
so 20,000 divided into 650 million would be probably something like 30,000 EC.
1, 2, 3, 20,000. Yeah, 32.5.
Divided by 2.67.
That's about 12,172.
Per passport. Right? That's frightening. And we're hearing numbers like $200,000 and $250,000 for our passports.
Alan, if I come in there, I would say one of the things that characterizes this administration over the last 5 years has been its capacity to not reveal to the public information the public ought to know. Its capacity to obfuscate and to, I don't want to use the word hide. It simply does not believe its duty to let the public know information that the public has a right to know and have access to. And I can assure you, if it was the United Workers' Party in government, you would have heard an outcry from the opposition and from civil society on why it is we would have not been giving them all the information. And unfortunately, this is really where we are. So in this discussion we're having here, it should never be for you or for me to be trying to work out information that really ought to be in the public domain readily. And it begs the question.
Not to cut you short, Titus, but the auditors said the same thing.
Correct.
The auditors basically said at the time of going through the financial statements, they had not received the annual report and therefore cannot comment as to whether the annual report and the financial statements are in sync.
And
that's a damning statement.
And imagine going into the general election. That was one of the major concerns that we put to the public, because our argument was the government has a duty under the law within 6 months of the closure of the financial year to present and to table in the House the full report, that means the CIP report and the audited statements in the Parliament. That is what the law requires. And in detail. And we are aware that the other statutory organizations, such as the ANC Post Authority, have met that obligation, continue to meet that obligation, and the ANC Post Authority does not produce turnover in the realm of what is produced under the CIP in terms of the amount of money involved in its operation. Yet, an entity such as this, there is opaqueness, and it begs the question why. You would have thought that the more you have monies, resources, public resources that the public ought to know about, the more of that you have produced or is available, is the more you would have accountability, not the less.
Right.
And it is about what you people will see as a pattern of behavior. Because we do not know, and this is going to come to haunt St. Lucians, all of us who continue to remain silent, it will come to haunt us. There is an agreement that the government has with Global Ports, and no one knows what the content of that agreement is. And you hear things, so we know of certain things, and it begs the question again, why is it that the government will enter into an agreement with a private entity which will take on the use of national assets, not for 1 year, or for 2 years, or for 10 years, or for 20 years, but for 30 to 40 years, and the public have no idea what are the terms and conditions that govern this agreement? And when we ask the government, what are these conditions? Silence. It's as if you do not have a right to know. It's as if this agreement is a personal agreement between some minister and another entity, which is not. It is the people of St. Lucia who have entered into an agreement with a company, and therefore the people ought to know. So there is this cloud of darkness, this black hole that this administration continues to work and treats St. Lucians with contempt. That it's like you do not have the mental capacity to be able to understand. And therefore, we shall treat you as not needing to know. Now,
Right.
these types of tendencies, especially where you have a government with overwhelming majority, are signals of what you call authoritarianism or
Right.
dictatorialism. And we have to be careful as a population where we're headed. The greater the power you have, the greater the responsibility for accountability, not
Right.
less.
Right.
The greater. And therefore, the government is under even more direction, more need to account, not less need. And I'm afraid that this is where we are. And what bothers me more is that so many of our people are silent on what they know should not be a matter to be silent on.
Now, what stands out for me about the GPH deal, and it was
Don't know
very,
what the deal is.
well, we don't know what it
Good.
is, but it was very concerning to me that soon after that deal was signed and the ports were handed over, GPH then reorganized their structure and are now trading as a private company, where it is that much more difficult to get statements, any sort of information in the public domain about their finances. And to me, this is an even greater layer of concern.
And therefore a greater need for us to know
Right.
what is the agreement. And like I say to people, my immediate concern is not so much GPH. GPH would have sat with the government and negotiate an agreement.
Right.
And the government has a responsibility to the people of St. Lucia to negotiate the best agreement for us.
Right.
So if the government did a bad job of negotiating a bad agreement, the government has to own up to that responsibility or that outcome. GPH would do whatever GPH has to do, and it is up to the government to do what is right for St. Lucia.
That's right.
So until we know what this agreement is, we are left in the world of speculation. So you mean, let's understand this. For the next 40 years, you mean the people of St. Lucia will go through life speculating on an agreement that St. Lucia has with a private entity? You think this is really where an educated people, an advanced people can be or should be? We're not in the Stone Ages. And you know what makes this look so terrible? GPH has entered into similar arrangements with Antigua and Barbuda, with the Bahamas, and those agreements are in the public domain.
Right.
So it begs the question, why is it that we in St. Lucia do not have access to this agreement?
Now, I've heard some people make the comparison with the GPH deal and the deal originally struck with the between the government of St. Lucia and Lucelec. They were saying that it was a long-term agreement. I think the political leader, you can chime in here if my information is not correct, but I believe that the original deal with Lucelec was, I think, 100-year deal or 99-year deal. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it wasn't 9 a.m. But I want to say to you, just based on what Titus just said, which is 100% correct, there's something that's fundamentally different between the Lucelec deal and the GPH deal. The Lucelec deal, the contract's public.
It's public.
Right.
And not only that, there are entities, including St. Lucians, who are shareholders of Lucelec. And there's annual board meetings, and there's reports. Okay, there's full transparency, and you can never say that any of the resources from Lucelec are being used in a political manner, because they must account for every single dollar that they spent. To your point, Eldris, GPH has become a private company. Once we have given them the money, GPH itself has no obligation to tell us how they're spending the money.
Right.
Because it was a quid pro quo. I'm going to take on the risk. You give me this money. Very similar to with Galaxy.
Right.
You give me 6,000 citizenships, I'll make sure that you vet those persons, but you don't ask me any questions as to how much I'm selling them for or anything else. And in turn, I will spend $100 million on infrastructure programs. Well, 6,000 passports has a market value of $1.2 billion.
So,
does that make sense?
So for potentially $1.2 billion that you're giving someone, the person in return will give you $100 million. I mean, where on earth, in what planet does anyone do such a thing? How do you do that? And how does a nation of people say nothing? It's
I remember,
it's just
I remember,
mind-boggling.
Titus, we got those contracts because they were leaked. It wasn't even to say that the contracts were given to us.
And again, it's a pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
And then there is no accountability on the economic fund. Another pattern of behavior, a black hole. And these are not personal resources. These are not the resources of Philippe Pierre, or the resources of Ernest Hilaire, or Alva Baptiste, or Moussa Jean-Baptiste. These are your resources, the people's resources. So you cannot just sit and tell them by your action that they are not entitled to know.
And imagine, Titus, that we are now finding out after the election that $110 million was spent into SSDF, and the government would simply say, "Oh, you benefited from it," but who benefited, why they benefited, and what the money was used for? You're not supposed to ask those questions on state assets during an election period. I would dare say that this is unprecedented, that any sitting government would have used state resources so prejudicially as they did. It is just unacceptable.
And this environment that this government is creating for St. Lucia is not an environment that is not being observed by international other governments who have been development partners of St. Lucia. This is not something that is going unnoticed by investors, genuine investors who want to come to St. Lucia. And this is not a pattern of behavior that is not going unnoticed by crooked investors who would want to come into St. Lucia. All of this is being noticed. And therefore, the need for transparency, the need for public accountability is not something we do for show.
Right.
It is something that is central to the development prospects of our country. So if the opposition or any St. Lucian on the street is asking for transparency and accountability in those matters, it is because it is in their interest for it to happen. It is in the interest of the children for it to happen. So don't treat it would be ill-advised for the government to treat the requests and calls from the opposition for transparency as if it is Alan Chasney or Titus Prevel who's asking for a personal favor. It is the people of St. Lucia who, any St. Lucian, in any capacity, have a right to ask that question.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
I did hear the Prime Minister say that they were seeking a PPP agreement for Wasco. Now, I do recall, I think it was 2006, thereabout, where, or was it later, where a proposal was made to hand Wasco over to a French company, and the government would have assumed the debts of Wasco. And thankfully, the administration changed, and that was foiled. But now the Prime Minister is saying that we had it all wrong. It was commercializing Wasco. It wasn't selling it, or it wasn't privatizing, it was commercializing. But there's a difference. Commercializing means that the government retains ownership of the assets, but the entity is run in as a business for profit. Whereas privatizing means you sell it to a private company. Now, this PPP agreement that they are seeking for Wasco, I'm very concerned based on GPH, based on so many other, uh, even CIP, Caribbean Galaxy, that we are heading in the same direction with Wasco, one more state asset, an essential asset at that, that the people of St. Lucia will lose control over. I mean, are my fears unfounded? Do you think?
Before the political leader comes in, I will simply say this. When you observe this labor administration and you hear of policy statements or policy positions, I always ask the question, what is the problem that the state is seeking to solve with the policy prescription? What is the problem?
Right.
And so before you tell me you will enter a PPP, you must outline the problem you're seeking to solve. And we as a people can see if a PPP and the terms and conditions of that PPP will actually lead to a solution.
Right.
Which is similar to what we have with GPH.
Right.
What was the problem that the government was seeking to solve? What was it? And when it was articulated in the parliament, I understand it had to do with SLASPA's inability to raise the capital to undertake the project that GPH is undertaking. Well, now we can see, we always knew then, we can see now that SLASPA was always in a
Yeah.
position. And if in fact the government had negotiated for SLASPA to have gotten even an additional $2,
Right.
not 10, just $2 more from the cruise head tax, it would have been in an even more opportune position to undertake those projects. So you ask the question, the agreement with GPH was a policy decision to solve what problem? So when you hear what problem was being proposed to be solved and you look at the policy approach, you can see that it makes no sense.
Right.
So in like manner, before we can talk about a PPP for Wasco, we have to define the problem and then decide, is that the best approach to solve the problem? That's how I know planning takes place. That's how I know development planning takes place, especially in a developing country.
Right.
Alan, any comments?
Look, I can't say it any better than what you've just said. Wasco has been a problem only under the Labour Party administrations. Whenever Wasco operates under a United Workers' Party government is when they expand. And all of a sudden, these problems that are recurring under Labour Party don't happen. How is it that between 2016 to 2021, and when even one takes into consideration COVID, Wasco didn't have these problems?
Right.
Wasco was adding new treatment centers, putting in new pipes, building buildings, and expanding, and getting ready for the growth in the South.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, you change the management, you change the government, and all of a sudden they can't pay bills and they cannot produce water. The decision to stop the desilting. Why? And the issue that they're dealing with, whether you desilt or not, remains there. The loss of treated water has always been a big issue. When we came into government, the decision was made to deal with the desilting first. And then you would have come now to deal when we were doing the highway up north, and the opportunity availed itself for us to put the new pipes in. We did. And look at that. After the election, the pipes sat there for 5 years to continue all the way to Groselet. And it's only when it was pointed out to them that the pipes were on the ground, I think that they got embarrassed, went and got a $4 million loan. That's what was preventing SLASPA, Wasco from finishing the pipes. If you have a plan and you know how much you're going to be expanding the country by, you would know how much more investment you need in Wasco. And so what? Every time the government has a problem a statutory body or has a problem in a government ministry, they're just going to give it away. So that's what we call the ostrich syndrome. Put your head in a hole and pretend like it's not there anymore. The problem is going to suddenly just go away. Privatizing things does not solve these problems. So when you look at the deal that was being offered, is that the government of St. Lucia was going to absorb the entire debt of Wasco. The government of St. Lucia was going to sell the assets of Wasco for $1. And the government of St. Lucia was going to allow the new entity to change the price of water. Now, people may not want to hear this. The fundamental issue that Wasco has is electricity. So, like today, Wasco's financial position is going to be exasperated by the fact that the price of electricity is going to go up, and yet the price of water remains fixed. That's the difference with Lucelec. Lucelec has a deal where there's a cost of producing the electricity, but if in fact the price of gasoline goes up, they're allowed to charge a surcharge. So it doesn't take a mathematical genius to know that if you're being forced to sell water under the cost of producing the water, you have to lose money. Right. So either the government of St. Lucia is going to agree to subsidize it or find a different mechanism to price out water. But why would we allow somebody else to resolve that problem? And when the capacity to Titus's point, the government has the capacity to do it itself. Once you understand what you want to do, then do it. You don't need a private sector person to come in to tell you to do it. I mean, we built the dam.
Right.
Sir John brought water to 95% of the communities. I mean, I'm married to Raquel Duboulay. Her father is Dunstan Duboulay, who was the chairman of Wasco for all those years. And look at the things that Wasco did, but you never heard about these problems that they're having there today.
Now, that is true because, I mean, for the first time in a long time, St. Lucians are really suffering for water. I made a statement and I said that I believe that there are certain people who have forgotten that water comes from their tap, because every time you open the tap, there's no water. And there are so many implications for, I mean, water is life. That is not just a nice phrase. That is actually the truth. I'm very concerned, because I have a background in health, that the Prime Minister keeps pushing harvest rainwater, but the dangers associated with it, the marked increase in vector-borne diseases, and for those of you who don't know, vector-borne diseases are diseases carried by mosquitoes like dengue fever, Zika, chikungunya. It's a domino effect. Not having a steady supply of potable water can cause havoc in our healthcare system, and we all know that the healthcare system is on its last legs. I'm sorry to say that, but the truth is the truth. And even going back to the budget and the CIP funds, we're being told that CIP monies are being injected into the OKEU hospital. But what is happening with St. Jude? What?
Well, but as I said too, and again, Titus can expand upon it. The first big issue is that we have a debt crisis that's getting worse by the day and needs to be addressed. Secondly, the cost of operations of government are increasing faster than the revenue is increasing. Right. And that there are some worrisome things that are coming down the pipeline. When we move into the new halls of justice, that's going to add $30 million to rent. A number has not been produced as to how much it's going to cost us to operate the halls of justice. 15 courts. Mm-hmm. No final number Well, we don't even have a final number on the construction of St. Jude's, nor do we have a final number on operations. What I can tell you is the government has been in the habit of spending $18 million a year is what they've been given to St. Jude's to operate. There's no way that that new facility, as dysfunctional as it is going to cost $18 million a year to operate. Government is going to have to take over the entire operation of St. Jude's, and there's going to be significant revenue problems. If in fact
Are you there?
there's going to be a global contraction in the economy, and Titus, you would have seen last night, price of oil went to $126. Thankfully, it came down to 116 this morning. But all indications is that the solution to the Middle East is not going to happen overnight, and therefore there's going to be significant contractions. The Central Bank of England and the Central Bank of Europe gave presentations this morning to maintain their interest rates temporarily stable because of the amount of instability that there is in the world today. And I just say this because the revenue that we've been accustomed to generating is not guaranteed.
Right.
Okay, it's not guaranteed. And so therefore, there are some worrying signs, some headwinds that are heading our way in St. Lucia. And the solution to those problems are not going to be nice. I want to say, and again, this is not about being an alarmist, but this is about dealing with the issues. We have made significant amendments to Bankruptcy Act, our Insolvency Act, which, if the economy tightens up, that the banks now are going to have the ability to foreclose on people's homes and businesses much faster.
Oh, wow.
Okay? And it is my belief that the government needs to be much more aware of that and not to take as much of a chance as they are in there being a collapse in our economy. Because the people are going to pay the price. People are already paying the price as it pertains to immigration. UK visas, US visas, Canadian visas, and a possibility of our Schengen visa being in jeopardy. All of these things are going to affect the public of St. Lucia. And these are things that are coming down the pipeline fast and furious. So I just wanted to say, because I need to come off at this point, I know that Titus and I have had these kind of discussions. I would imagine that they would have shared some very similar thoughts with the chamber as to what the chamber should be concerned about. But not only do we need proper fiscal management, which is what I've been talking about, the burden of debt and the cost of operations, but we also need to strengthen our governance procedures. Civil society and individual citizens cannot continue to believe there's somebody else who's going to solve this problem. We have a judiciary that's questionable. I mean, I've seen some court cases, some decisions that have come out. I see a judge who claimed that there was political interference, and instead of there being a proper investigation, he was transferred.
Wow.
So we have a lot of work to do as a country, and we don't have the comfort of saying, well, the government messed us up. We can see these things happening right before our very eyes, and it requires an intervention on all of our parts. So I'll hand it over to you, Titus. I know that you can finish up and articulate the positions very, very well, because you're very, very familiar with what's going on, and you certainly would be familiar with the governance issues as being a former permanent secretary in government. And it's to say, the permanent secretaries, the director of finance, and many of these positions are there to work in the best interest of the people. And that is why we will write the director of finance to seek an explanation as to what happened with this $110 million and some of the other decisions that the government has made. Because in this instance, as I said, Elris, the director of finance wears two hats. He's the chairman of the Economic Fund, which has not been audited for 5 years.
Wow.
And he needs to account for that, as well as why was this money sent, and was it all sent to SSDF, and what was the criteria that was used for the disbursements of the funds, and have they done an audit on the completion of these projects? Did the people of St. Lucia get value for that money being spent? Thank you very much, Elvis.
Thank you for
Thank
that.
you, Titus.
Yes, Alan. Are you living now?
Yeah, he's signing off. So we're gonna take a quick commercial break and then we will turn it over to you.
You already know the power of Licks products on your clothes and household. You licked your whites and colored clothes, leaving them fresh and scented. You licked your dishes and left your hands protected with vitamin E. You licked your floors, even licked your toilet. Now we expand and bring you 3 new scents in our fabric softener: Balmy Sunshine, Summer Sunshine, and Thousand Flowers. And licks those stains off of colored clothes with Licks Color Safe Bleach. Licks went even further with Bondi Care body soap bars in deodorant and antibacterial. So Licks tiredness and bacteria out and refresh your tired body. Your products giving you Licks? Then choose Licks from the main distribution league. Available at all leading supermarkets.
Seabreeze Adventures would like to announce its official water taxi service for St. Lucia Jazz 2026. Pickup can be arranged from either Castries or Rodney Bay to the Pigeon Island National Landmark on show days. Transportation from Rodney Bay costs $10 US or $25 EC one way or $20 US or $50 EC return trip, and can be accessed at Lavi, Hamley Suites, or at the Rodney Bay Marina. Transportation from Castries cost $20 US or $50 EC one way or $40 US or $100 EC a round trip. Pickup points in the city are at La Place Carenage or at Point Seraphine. Customers wishing to take advantage of this service can book in advance by contacting Captain Warren at telephone number 1758-713-3196. Pickup starts at 10 a.m. until shows end. Seabreeze Adventures, not just a tour, but an adventure.
You're listening to a special edition of Hard Talk here on Fire 107.7 FM. And earlier we were joined by the political leader of the United Workers' Party and the leader of the opposition, the sole opposition voice in the House of Parliament, Honorable Alan Shasney. And he did raise some very important issues and very important concerns pertaining to the budget and the direction, the economic direction that the country is headed in. And now we're left with, well, not the least, but the new voice in the House, in the Senate. I think that's the upper house. Right, the upper house. So I gave you today one member of the upper house and one member of the lower house so we can have a very broad view of the pertinent issues that affect St. Lucia at the moment. And we're here with Mr. Titus Preville, who, in my opinion, a gentleman who needs no introduction when it comes to matters of economic policy. Mr. Preville is a former permanent secretary. Help us in what ministry, Mr. Preville? A number of them. Well, let's just say he is well versed in governance, because it's not the prime ministers and the ministers who run the country. It is, in fact, the permanent secretaries. Mr. Preville, Mr. Shasney left us with a number of pressing issues, and it's not always easy for laymen such as myself to understand the impact of these terms. You hear about debt to GDP, you hear about economic downturn and recession and all of these things. You hear broad policies in the budget, and you hear everybody clapping and banging the table. But at the end of the day, how does it affect me?
Yeah. You see, Eldris, there are a number of things that are happening simultaneously or in a country. And we see a number of things that are happening simultaneously, even in this most recent budget presentation by the government. And I always remember, I try to remember to tell people, a budget is the most significant policy tool that a government has to implement strategy to help shape the direction of an economy of
Right.
a country. That is in especially in the context of a small open economy such as St. Lucia. The role of government is so critical. Now, when you compare government in a place like St. Lucia to government in a developed country, the private sector generally drives a lot more and has greater influence because of its size.
Right.
And if you notice in the United States for many years, especially under Reagan and Ford and Thatcher, for instance, they were advocating for a smaller role for government and let government be involved in regulatory arrangements and let the private sector grow. Because they understand that true growth really takes place when the private sector is growing, not when the government is growing. So in this current budget we just saw there, we see government is in fact growing, and you now ask yourself, is the private sector growing at similar pace with the government? Because sustainable development in these countries require a growing private sector, a growing middle class.
Right.
It requires that. Uh, and the government really should be there to look at filling the gap and, of course, put in broad policy direction and ensuring we have a regulatory environment that is predictable. That
Right.
really becomes the role of the government. So when you look at these estimates, a couple of things you are forced to look at them.
Right.
And when you listen to the debate, you would have heard the government speak on things like they have, over the last 2 years, there have been continuous primary surpluses. The primary surplus would have increased, as they would tell you, in 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 um, in 2024 25 or 25, the primary surplus would have increased from 57.8 million in 24-25 to 94.2 million in 25-26. And what is the primary surplus? When you hear those words, what do they mean? A primary surplus simply tells you the extra money the government got in revenue versus the expenditure it had to undertake, all payments it had to make, except for interest payments on loans or interest payments on instruments, bonds, and treasury bills. So it does not include that. But running or having extra money means you have some money to go towards paying that.
Right.
But when you look at the nature of a primary surplus, it depends on government revenue. And government revenue depends on what? The performance of the economy.
Right.
So if your economy is contracting, it means these primary surpluses can actually decrease. If you have a number of external shocks, as we've seen in the price of oil, that can impact your excise taxes collected. In this case, because the price of oil is going up, and the government is refusing to bring the price of fuel down, the government is getting a windfall gain from higher prices. And that is a trap the government is finding itself in. Because even when you look at the primary surplus increasing, it's what is the source of the primary surplus? Is it from corporate tax income? Or is it from taxes at the border? What is its source of income that is causing it to have a primary surplus? So if the government is comforting itself with saying we are getting more money than we are spending, but at the same time you are actually increasing your level of fixed expenditure. What is that? So if you look at the social programs, the government has increased the number of fixed expenditure on the number of CXs it's going to pay for people. The money is allocated to mothers, pregnant mothers. These things are going to remain. They're not going away. But if you are also borrowing more, as the government has, borrowing more means you have to pay more principal and interest. So at one end of the candle, you are increasing your expenditure, which cannot go down. And you are depending on sources of income that you do not have control over.
Right.
You might very well find yourself running into a liquidity trap where you do not have enough money to meet your commitments.
Right.
And that is why you have the indicator called the debt to your GDP, meaning how much of your how much debt you are contracting relative to the monies you are earning, because
Right.
your GDP is the monetary value of all goods and services produced in an economy in a calendar year.
Mm-hmm.
So you are comparing how much money you have to spend in paying back debt with how much money the economy as a whole is generating. And let's bear in mind, not because the economy as a whole is generating more output, it means government's share of that is increasing. It all
Right.
depends on government's taxation policy, how it structures its taxes. So the concern is that we have had a situation where the debt to GDP is increasing.
Mm-hmm.
We understand now, based on the borrowing done in March, late March of this year, last month, that our debt is likely to move from the 75 point something percent it is now to almost 85%. And we have to bear in mind that debt to GDP at 85% is very close to what we had during COVID. And in COVID, the crisis years of COVID, our debt to GDP was about 92%.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do not have a crisis and you already have a debt to GDP of 85%, it means any shock, any external shock, which would force you to have to borrow, will put your country in a serious position fiscally. Therefore, that is why, if the alarm is being sounded that you need to look at the rate at which you are bringing on debt, there is good merit in it. There
Right.
is a reason for it. If the alarm is being sounded that you need to examine how you are contracting new expenditure, you need to pay attention to it. And this increase in recurrent expenditure includes what you call payment for rent.
Mm-hmm.
And we anticipate very soon the rental portion of government's recurrent expenditure will go up, because when the new halls of justice comes on, there is a recurrent expenditure to that.
Right.
So the government has to be keeping its eye on the ball at both ends. How much, and I say, bear in mind, when your recurrent expenditure is going up, when your debt is going up, and therefore your debt servicing is going to go up, the the run on your resources is going to increase, meaning the ability to maintain a primary surplus is likely to shrink. So
Right.
this is why it makes good sense to pay attention to the numbers and what is happening. So I have to concur with the leader of the opposition that where the direction in which we see our economy going is one of grave concern,
Mm-hmm.
and that the government needs to spend time taking a look at that. Now, I wanted to um, take up a very, I won't even call it controversial. I call it an important policy decision of the government,
Mm-hmm.
um, as reflected in the estimates. You know, a, a policy, as I was saying earlier, is a response to a problem.
Right.
It is an attempt to solve a problem that exists, or to provide an incentive to cause action in a particular direction. That is what you have as policy.
Right.
So when you look at the government's budget this year, there are some standout um, elements in it that we can take a look at.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, the total budget is 2.188 billion dollars, the largest in St. Lucia's history.
Mm-hmm.
We see that in education, the government proposes paying 5 C XC subjects per student.
Mm-hmm.
It looks at expanding the school feeding program. It looks at increasing support for early childhood education. Um, in terms of direct relief, it looks at a $1,000 one-off payment to expectant mothers, $700 one-time payment to pensioners, a $200 one-time payment to public assistance program clients. These are people who generally they're not on NIS, and they need to get direct assistance from government.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, this would be the elderly persons or some disabled people who are unable to earn anything for themselves. So the government is looking at this. The government is looking at housing assistance for low-income families, grants for persons with disabilities, and medical support and small business assistance. Now, this would be more on the social side, on the social side, support for families and citizens, and then you look at what the government has in terms of the economic measures to stimulate the economy. And of course, there are some projects with respect to infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you look at the programs of support for families and the social programs, there are some things in there that we need to have an overall discussion on the trajectory of those things. I think it is good anytime the government is able to give resources to anyone in the state, especially to those who need it. It is something that you must commend and you must support and you must encourage.
Right.
But I think you will agree with me that it does not help solve a problem if the government is taking state resources to help persons who are already able to help themselves.
I agree.
So if persons are able to send their children to school, the man and the woman who are planning their family are able to, they are earning the income, they have the means it takes to raise a child, that expectant mother, giving that person $1,000 is good, but does it actually solve a problem? In other words, did that couple, that person, did they have a problem of taking care of that mother before the $1,000 was given? If the answer is no, then really and truly, what is the problem you are trying to solve? And therefore, it is important that when the government undertakes projects such as giving mothers, pregnant women, a one-off $1,000, it really should anchor that, in my humble opinion, to reach the people who really need it, to reach those persons who this will make a material difference in their lives. Notwithstanding the amount is, in my view, nothing significant, but at least it is going to target persons who really need it. And
now,
therefore it is
before you continue, the Prime Minister did make a clarification. He said that it was not meant to be enough to rear a child. What it was meant to do was to provide some sort of cushion for the expenses when it comes to having kids. But he's also saying, which in my view just does not make any sense, that this is not meant as a incentive to have more babies, but an incentive to start a discussion.
Look, I asked the question, what is the problem that we are seeking to solve?
Right.
Until you do that clearly, because if the Prime Minister is saying those things, it means he has not yet defined the problem he's seeking to solve, and therefore he's all over the place.
Right.
So you have to treat these things seriously, because these are about allocation of state resources. If it is that you have identified that there are, or you have identified or set up criteria where a person can benefit from a mother, an expected mother, can benefit from $1,000, whether it is going to make a significant difference or not, but you've set up the criteria. I fully understand that because you then tell me what is the problem you're trying to solve. But I go back to the issue. When we undertake mass programs like that, it almost seemed to suggest to me that there is an underlying understanding that as if people are not able to take care of themselves, and therefore the government comes in to take care of the people. Now, if that is what you're thinking, then you have to ask, is it all the people who cannot take care of themselves? Or
Well-
is it some of the people who cannot take care of themselves?
Well,
Because if
he
it makes-
didn't really phrase it. This is my issue with this policy.
And I'm here.
Prime Minister-
I am not saying that the state should not intervene.
I
to
agree, I
provide,
agree.
Whether it's $1,000 or $10,000 or $1, I have no difficulty with the state intervening to do that. But it begs the question:
Right.
who are you seeking to help?
Because the Prime Minister did mention, and we know it is a significant problem, we have a serious decline, a concerning decline in our birth rates. And when you go out and you have a blanket policy like this, it seems to me that, like you rightfully said, the problem you're seeking to solve is that decline in birth rates. You're trying to incentivize, in my view, persons having more babies, but then he's trying to say, no, 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 that's not what I'm doing. And I just don't.
But I thought actually in the Senate, when I listened to the leader of government business, I thought there she provided some clarity. She indicated that it was actually meant to help deal with our declining population.
Right.
Now, let us say that that is what the problem you're trying to solve. You now then step back and say, how does that or that approach help deal with incentivizing persons to have more children? Because and every one of us will agree that $1,000 is,
It's a drop in a bucket.
and not only that, it is this one-time payment, does over 18 or 21 years, whatever it takes. It's just not sustainable.
Right.
Now, by the same token, we are almost assuming that people are and will not be able to work or work and earn sufficiently to take care of themselves. Because, Eldris, if our population, the people in our population are working, are gainfully employed, are they're earning incomes that can sustain them,
Right.
what is it you think the $1,000 will achieve?
Accomplish,
It
right.
will not. So when you see a policy like that, there almost seems to be an underlying assumption that the people are themselves unable to do for themselves. Or in other words, they will not be able to earn sufficient in the future, that they will remain poor, that they will always be depending. And that to me is a mindset that is dangerous.
Right.
Because governments must always, in my view, seek to encourage people to be productive, to be competitive, not to be dependent.
Right.
Because it is that stimulates greater creativity.
Right.
So,
I think people
Where there
have,
is-
hold on, not to cut you short, but I think people are starting to lose sight of the role of the government. In my view, I've always held the belief that a government minister or a government should not be giving you a handout. That should not be the way you profit from a government. In my view, the government's role is to provide an enabling environment so that you can do for yourself. You can have gainful employment. You can get access to proper health care. You can get access to proper housing. And you can prosper because the enabling environment is there. There's foreign investment. There is job creation. There's a cost of living that you know, you can sustain. There is proper infrastructure and just an enabling environment for personal growth.
That
But I
is,
think people are beginning to lose sight
and that is why I
of the
think,
role of government.
and that's why the government itself has a critical responsibility in the public education space to remind people of the role of government, to remind people of the responsibility of individuals.
Right.
Because let's face it, if and these and I will always say there are people who will always be in need of assistance for CXC and
Right.
beyond 5 CXCs, and there will always be persons who will be in need of support, pregnant women that will go beyond $1,000.
Right.
In other words, when we have that type of policy, for instance, for the $1,000 for women, it might very well be that we don't have a policy that gives everyone $1,000.
Right.
It is a policy that targets those who need it, and some who need it might actually need to get 3,000.
Right.
So to actually help that child, that mother and that child, as opposed to 1,000. And some persons who are getting the 1,000 really can do without that 1,000 because they are able to, they are gainfully employed, they're earning the income, they have made provision for their children, they're able to plan their so they are not in need.
Right.
And therefore, that $1,000 that they're getting, that should really go to somebody who
Right.
may not need one, but may need 1.5 or
And then
2.
and then you enter
you
the
really
territory.
begin to make an
You
impact.
enter the territory in the difference between equity and equality.
And that's the point.
Yeah.
And that's the point. So I think that it is important as the government crafts, and again, as I said, it all depends on what was the problem the government was trying to solve. So unless that problem is very well clear and it's articulated, then you are all over the place
Right.
with those types of policies. And I was having discussions with some people, and I was saying, I like the idea of the government supporting students with CXC, the payment of CXCs at the time. But there is an even bigger picture that we should be asking ourselves as a nation. So, Eldris, you have a daughter or son. What is it, a daughter?
Daughter.
And how old is your daughter now?
Well, right now she's 20.
Okay, well, so you are past that already.
Oh, thank God.
So if you had a daughter today
Right.
and your daughter was 5, you are sitting here today and you know to yourself that your daughter will have to write CXC at age 17.
Right.
What should you be doing today?
Saving.
You're good.
Saving up
So
my money.
you should be saying, let me save some money today towards my daughter's
Right.
CXC in 10 years' time
Mm-hmm.
or 12 years' time. So for me, it is important as a nation, as a government, that we send the right signals.
Right.
And the right signal for me is that we should be getting our people to be in the mode of taking life seriously,
Right.
planning the future. And if you begin to plan for your child in the next 17 years or 12 years, it will also increase your seriousness in planning, not just for the child, but for many other things in your life.
Now there's a
And
question.
that is the
now you
habit forming approach that you need to have in a nation for the nation to be competitive, to grow. So,
Now you look at it at this point, but I see a different side. And a lot of people who've listened to me, they would have heard me talk about the new class that is forming in St. Lucia, which I call the working poor. Now, it's all well and good for somebody to have an idea to save, but what about the capacity to save? And when you look at the cost of living in St. Lucia today, when you look at the taxes, the transportation, even the cost of basic goods. Do you know, Mr. Prevo, that the most expensive thing you can buy in the supermarket today is just simple goods used for basic hygiene, toothpaste, soap, shampoo,
so we have
deodorant. Deodorant is the most expensive. Creams. So
so Eldris,
hold on, let me finish. So here's my point. People may want to save, but in this cost of living crisis that we are seeing in St. Lucia, where your monthly salary does not cover the cost of basic goods, how are we to save? Now, to me, this is an indictment on the government because you are supposed to provide an enabling environment for me to be sustainable.
So you're looking at wage levels should be higher.
Wage levels should be higher or the cost of goods should be lower.
One is
But something
or a
needs,
combination of
or a
both.
combination of both.
And therefore, that is why the discussion on paying for CX is great to be done. It's great to do that. No problem. But it must be seen in what context.
Right.
Because while you will be doing that and you will be paying for, you are avoiding addressing a more fundamental problem or more critical problems that are with you, structural problems.
Right.
And the structural problem is a problem of level of wages. So while we are addressing the symptom or the outcome of the problem with the CXs, and that is, but we are avoiding
The actual problem.
right. And that is really and truly what you want to see a government do.
Right.
That is what you want to see reflected in government policy. So that the word you used, sustainability, is there. And you take a shortcut, an easy way out with respect to the approach that is being done here.
Yeah.
So I am asking the question, and I'm asking, where in the government's work program, in the government's budget, in the government's approach, are you seeing emphasis on really addressing the problem? It's not being done. So this budget is not transformational.
Right.
This budget is not shifting the needle. This budget is just maintaining the status quo without addressing the foundational problems we have. And that, in my view, is really where we are. It's not repositioning St. Lucia to be in a place of sustainability. So when you look at the theme of the budget, it says consolidating our gains, prospering in uncertain times. There is no prospering that is going to take place.
Yeah.
Because you have a budget that is actually maintaining or attempting to maintain
The
the
status
status
quo.
quo. At the same time, the fundamentals in this budget will lead to further deterioration. So you will not even be able to maintain the status quo. And that, to me, is the indictment in this budget.
So, Mr. Preville, and we've been here for quite some time. So, what, in your view, is needed at this point to, like you said, shift the needle?
You need transformational policies. I'll give an example of a transformational policy. You know, I will just go back to the health situation, for instance.
Right.
A child is born. When a child is born, and the child will grow until age, under the parent's care, until the legal age of 18, and even beyond that. What is one of the more critical things that this child is going to need, and the parent will need to help take care of that child? One of the most critical things is health care. You must be healthy to be able to work.
Right.
You must be healthy to be able to go to school and to do all of these things. So when you look at how the United Workers' Party was approaching that concept of healthcare, which is not a one-time concept, not a one-time payment, it would have been with us forever. It would have helped maintain health. When we look at introducing universal, not universal healthcare, which is what exists now, when we're looking at introducing a national health insurance,
yeah.
what was that meant to do? It was meant to ensure we help take the burden off the mother, of the father, for himself and herself in terms of finding money when in times of illness, also taking care of the child in
Right.
times of illness. So even if you have a one-time payment for a mother of $1,000, but when the child is sick, your option now is universal health care. And we know the constraints with universal health care. The constraints are so stark that if universal health care was really giving us the results we need, do you think we would still have health insurance?
No.
Do you think any one of the government ministers would continue to have health insurance?
Now, the thing
But
about the
everyone,
universal health care that people are not realizing is this. This proposal has been around since Kenny Anthony was prime minister. For all of these years,
it has not yet.
they have not found a sustainable way of funding it. They've said to us, they said that the VAT would be the vehicle to fund it initially.
The health and security tax.
Then they said the health and security levy. Now they're saying they cannot implement it fully. They have to implement it in phases because funding is a problem. But it's the same. Why not go back to the drawing board? Why not try a different approach? Because you guys have been trying to fund this thing forever.
And that, Eldris, takes us to where we were, where our political party advanced to the people of St. Lucia a different approach. An approach that would deal not with any one-time payment,
Right.
but take care of that ad infinitum, into the future. And that is what you call a transformative policy.
Right.
It changes the goalpost completely. So you ask what would have been, you asked me at the outset, what would have been one of the, I would say, health is your wealth.
Right.
And this is one of the policies that we would have implemented and we will implement once we get into office. As soon as elections are called, we will implement that policy for the benefit of the people of St. Lucia. This is one of those that we want to take. Another very important transformational policy that we would have looked at is the whole issue of migration.
Mm-hmm.
A proper migration policy. And what does that mean? You look at the needs of people today, the skills needs of the private sector. If you want this economy to grow, the private sector needs to have the
grow.
tools.
Yeah.
And the most important tools are the people. Do we have these people here now, today, that they are available? In many instances, no. We have a regime now that utilizes what we call work permits.
Mm-hmm.
But a work permit regime is only one component of your migration or labor migration strategy.
Right.
We needed to have, and the government needs to have, a labor migration framework that addresses what are the skills gaps we have in St. Lucia.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the persons we need to bring into the country and for how long?
Right.
We need to look at, should we have a strategy to increase the population of St. Lucia? I think yes. And how do you do it? Should we not have a strategy of importing people here who are skilled so that upon coming in, they are already immediately engaged in productive activity?
Right.
Isn't that part of a strategy that we could employ and embrace to help deal with our future, our slow population growth and the implications for our NIC?
Now,
Because remember, a question was asked of the Prime Minister as to the issue on the NIC, and he said have more children. But even that was, I tell myself he was speaking in jest, he was not serious, he had not given it any thought, and he responded like that. But there are answers that we could give to this question.
Now, speaking on that point, one of the things for me, and to me it's a no-brainer, and I first heard this policy proposed by the political leader on he appeared on Meet the Opposition. And he said the fastest way to solve this problem is to look to the diaspora, to entice persons like yourself who came back home to serve your country. Because we do have very skilled St. Lucians in so many fields that we need, fields that, in my view, would open up, would increase economic activity and to better the standard of living in St. Lucia. These people are out there. They're not out there partying. Well, maybe there are people out there partying, but most of the St. Lucians that live in the diaspora, in the UK, in Canada, in Europe, these people are engaged in constructive, employment. They're working in fields like healthcare, construction, and so many innovative fields, even research and development, that can add a new aspect of economic growth to our country. And when these people come home, not only do they augment the workforce, they open up new avenues because they bring with them new skills and competencies, and they can hit the ground running. They can begin immediately to contribute to NIC, to taxes, and to the overall growth of our economy. But when the Prime Minister was asked that, he said he's never even thought about it.
Well, you see, that's why I said a migration policy framework.
Mm-hmm.
In a migration policy framework, one component is labor migration.
Right.
So you see, this is why it is so important to identify the problem and then come up with proper solutions. You see, the situation you mentioned there with respect to the diaspora coming in, the diaspora it's automatic. The diaspora should be coming in and do all the things you do there. But you have to ask yourself, have we created the environment locally to cause the diaspora to come?
And that's where
to want to come.
That's where it comes, where I see the role of government and providing an enabling environment.
But if you have a proper migration policy, a proper labor migration policy, it will address all of these components, so that you know you are targeting your diaspora. You know what it is your diaspora will need. You now have the policy to deal with that, so you actually get to bring them back home. And one of the important things that they will need to have and they will want to have is healthcare.
Healthcare.
So
number one.
So you begin to see how the process requires thought, not just doing surface things, not just doing things that appear good, not just doing populist things, but doing things that are deep and transformational. And that is why I said to you, when you look at this budget, you ask yourself, where are the transformational
policies?
And you don't see them. It's more of maintaining the status quo and hoping that if you put your head in the sand long enough, as the ostrich, everything will go by and you'll be okay. It does not work. And I know we're coming to an end, and I wanted to just maybe say a word on the health and security tax and statements that have been made on that. I went on the Inland Revenue Department website, and written there was the clear statement that the health and security tax would have been
a two-year tax.
A 2-year tax. The Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance has indicated that he himself never said so. He's indicated that, and he's absolutely right. He never said so. The legislation does not say it was sunset legislation. He is absolutely correct in that regard. But it now, as a population, you ask yourself some simple questions. Where on earth would the controller of inland revenue find it upon himself or herself to put on the public website that this policy would have been in effect for 2 years? I have been a permanent secretary.
It's not just inland revenue. It's on the Ministry of Health.
But
Every single
I
we all know, and I was at the time in mainstream media when this policy was proposed, and I can tell you without fear or favor, the policy was proposed for a period of 2 years. In fact, the Prime Minister first introduced the tax as a temporary measure.
Well, the Prime Minister might have forgotten, but if the Prime Minister had forgotten, he had said it. Those departments, especially Customs and Inland Revenue, fall under his direct purview.
Right.
He is the minister for those areas. And for 2 years, in his name, these agencies of his have had that, not an internal policy, miss, a public facing policy. So I am now asking myself, did those officials, the director, the controller of Inland Revenue, take it upon herself to just introduce 2 years? Did the controller of Inland Revenue just do that on her own? And if she did, the Prime Minister should tell the nation what action he's taking to ensure that
this doesn't happen again.
Because I am now hearing a Prime Minister says that what you see under my ministry, I had nothing to do with it. And therefore, if he had nothing to do with it, he needs to tell us what action he's taking to ensure it doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
You see, you cannot have your cake and eat it.
You're
It doesn't work like that. I think the Prime Minister should own up to the fact that this is public policy that is documented.
Mm-hmm.
And if the government has changed its mind, do the honorable thing and say, we have changed our mind. And if you have not changed your mind, but it was your intention all along, say, well, we always intended it to be permanent. We just tricked you in the earlier part, but it was all. But don't look at people in the country in the eye and tell them this, because it makes the Prime Minister look bad.
Now, Mr. Preville, I was just about to say that it seems to me that the Prime Minister never intended to have this as a temporary tax, because you announced it as a temporary measure. You said for a period of 2 years, and I was in attendance at the press conference
The Prime Minister has challenged that. He has said, show me where he ever said. He has challenged that.
Well, the clips, we've been searching for the clips and we cannot find them, and I guess that was deliberate on his part, saying that you cannot find it. These parts has been scrubbed.
As a journalist, I will say my former life, if you don't have that evidence and the Prime Minister said he didn't
and
say,
I agree.
You cannot. But I will say what is true though.
And I agree.
What is true is that it is on a public platform under his supervision.
Right.
It has been there for a long time, and he has not denounced it was there. He has not said it was not in his name, and he has not said to the nation what action he's taking for persons who put things out there in his name that implicate his authority.
Now here's my point.
Sorry, not the Prime Minister, the Minister for
Finance. Now here's my point. This is an indictment on the minister, because it says to me as a citizen that when you first introduced this tax, you knew very well that you never intended it as a temporary measure, but that's how you sold it to the public.
The public will have to deduce that now.
You sold it to the public as a temporary measure.
The public will have to make that deduction themselves. But I will always say the Prime Minister never said it.
Yeah.
But what I can say is that the Prime Minister's action has now signaled something.
So is the Prime Minister now saying that back in July 2023 he lied to the St. Lucian public?
The Prime Minister did not lie.
Is that what he's saying?
No, the Prime Minister, because to say the Prime Minister lied, you must say he said something and he has done something else. The Prime Minister has challenged you to find where he has said that, and you cannot find where he has said that. So I am not even having the discussion on that.
Right.
My discussion is on the fact that the Prime Minister has direct oversight over ministries under his portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And under those ministries, there is public communication on a 2-year period.
Right.
And the Prime Minister himself has not said that these communications were illegitimate or
Right.
not right, that the people who put them out there did it without his knowledge. He has not said that.
That's
so the
true.
Prime Minister has to own it. He has to own it. And that's why I say now he must own it. And if it was not his intention, he needs to say so also. So that is what we can expect from the Prime Minister. But he cannot have his cake and eat it. And he cannot sweep it under the carpet. Because you see, many businesses, many people plan those things in their investments, in their work, in their approach. They plan. These are things because a government is supposed to be a serious entity.
Right.
And therefore, when the government has announced a policy or taken a stance on something, people factor that, investors factor that into their planning, into the
Right.
medium term, into the short term, into the
Right.
long term. And to shift in midstream also causes dislocation. And it does not build trust. It does not build trust.
But Mr. Preville,
So you have a
Mr. Preville,
government-
let's be honest. I know you want to err on the side of caution, but let's be honest. We have seen in the past the Prime Minister making pronouncements and then miraculously or mysteriously forgetting that he has said it, denying outright that he has said it, even in the face of evidence to the contrary. So
So my focus
that
is
seems
this.
to be his modus operandi.
My focus is this. We have an administration in government where at the head of the government on a very important matter like this, there seems to be an area of distrust. An administration where there is simply no accountability on all the very important issues.
Yeah.
There is no transparency. And what I'm saying is that we are at a place in our country where people do not know what it is they're dealing with. There are many actions that seem to appease, actions meant to appease, populist actions, things that look good, things that will make you feel, hey, they're giving me $500 today. Oh, they
Right.
give, and therefore people are going to say, what a good government. They're doing all these good things for me, not understanding that behind that is so much more going on that
Right.
is undermining those very public, outward looking things. So I think we as a nation, we now need to take stock. We need to look very
Carefully, yeah.
at what is happening and look at it with our eyes wide open, and so that we do not say tomorrow, I did not know, I did not understand. Because in this world, there is very little place for persons who do not know and,
And
who
do not understand, yes.
You
So-
pay a high price for that.
Now, in interest of wrapping up, we do have to think. Just give me your final thoughts. What's your, in your opinion, where do we go from here?
It is fair to say our country is at a point where the indicators in terms of the trend we're seeing, especially in our debt, especially in our expenditure, public debt, is worrying. We are at a point where we are living in a world of great uncertainty, geopolitical uncertainty, and even relations that we had as a country with one of the most developed country in the world is leaving us in a very uncertain place.
Right.
In a situation like that, I believe we need to be very meticulous in our approach and our planning.
Right.
Our planning needs to be plans that give us sustainability and give us as much protection as possible. I don't think this is a time for any government to be opaque with its people, to not give its people full disclosure. So our country is at a state where we need to have a government that comes full and be honest with its people, let people understand the full implications of its policies. They can see for themselves, they can judge for themselves, and they can determine if our country is going in the right direction or not. But that depends on the government having the testicular fortitude and the respect for law and for the people
Yeah.
to do the right thing. So this is where we are. As far as I can see it right now, it is a very, very precipitous position we're in on a number of fronts. The political leader identified a number of them, but it is a place where our people need to wake up, look around you, smell the coffee, and keep your eyes wide open on what's happening around you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Preville, for taking the time out. I know you were at a previous engagement, and
Myself, I was a member of the audience, but my colleague Tommy Descott,
all right.
he presented to the chamber. He was part of a panel.
Wow.
On the chamber, which looked at the budget presentation, and I think he did very well in his presentation as he did in the Senate.
Well, I hope to pull to get Tommy to come in, but he's very, oh.
I think it is. I will say to St. Lucians, not because I am a member of the United Workers' Party, not because I am a former candidate of the United Workers' Party. I would say to St. Lucians, ignorance doesn't help anyone.
Right.
It makes no sense to bury your head in the sand
and hope it goes away.
And therefore, one of the things that we should do is take some time, go on YouTube, listen to his presentation in the Senate on how we approach the problem of the country,
right,
and get an appreciation of where the United Workers' Party is and how we are approaching the development of St. Lucia and how we have conceptualized the problems we have and our approach to it. I think it would be helping everyone for them to do that for themselves.
Right. But I do hope to have Tommy as my guest one of these days. But thank you so much for joining us here, Mr. Preville. Your explanation on the economic policies and where St. Lucia really is at this time was very informative. And the comments, I regretfully, we didn't get a chance to go through the comments because of time constraints, but I think the people are beginning to open their eyes to the realities of the situation. And we had a very good discussion with the political leader who shone a light on a number of issues that laymen like myself would probably just overlook, not realizing how important these things are to our everyday life. Please don't be a stranger. Don't hesitate to come back when you have something to say. It's always a pleasure having you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Eldridge, thank you very much. In those discussions, I've found it's not necessarily important to go into all the numbers and because people will not remember the numbers.
Right.
But what we really need to do is to help people along the journey to see the bigger picture and to encourage persons to take personal responsibility,
right,
to go and read for themselves,
yes,
listen for themselves, so that they could see if the person speaking here, me, whether I was misleading them, so that there's accountability.
Right.
I encourage that.
Thank you very much. Guys, this has been a special edition of Hard Talk, but the real thing is coming up at 2 p.m., so don't stray too far from that dial. Thank you very much for joining us. We had, of course, a discussion between the political leader, Mr. Alan Chasney, Honorable Alan Chasney, and Mr. Titus Preville. And I hope that you guys have gotten a deeper appreciation for the state of the economy, the state of the country, and exactly where we need to go from here and where our country needs to go, so that we can have a future that is sustainable, because that is the goal, sustainability. Thank you so much for joining us here on Fire 107.7 FM. Join us again at 2 p.m. for Hard Talk, where we discuss more of the issues that matter. Bye-bye.